Welcome to Elevated Business with my partner, Marbue Dennis. And we have with us a wonderful guest that I've been looking forward to talking with. We're talking with David Harrison. He's an American former professional basketball player with the NBA, with the Indiana Pacers. And he also played 3 years in China, which is definitely a topic we need to talk about because I was living in Shanghai while you were playing with the Beijing Ducks and down in Guangdong and Tianjin. So I look forward to kicking off this inaugural first produced episode of Elevated Business. And Brother Marbue, great to see you on this early morning.
Likewise, brother. Always blessed and grateful to start the day communicating and talking about a range of subjects.
Fantastic. So we have the privilege of talking with David, and it's because of your relationship with him. And I hear that there's such a good relationship that he's actually given you a nickname.
Yeah. I mean, David and I, we were actually playing basketball against each other in college. And he was playing for the Colorado Buffs, where Deion Sanders is now coaching, and they were the big boys compared to little old Cal Poly. And we went into his stadium arena, and all my teammates were intimidated, like they couldn't dribble the ball up the court, they couldn't see straight. And I went in there beating the drums of Africa, like ready to go to war. And so it was like two big elephants in the paint, just locking horns and going at it. It was quite the time. And then the next year, I didn't stand as much of a chance. He came in focused and just, was an NBA 7-foot dominant center. So, but yeah, David came up with a nickname for me over the years in business when he had stints at Morgan and doing a wide range of different developments. We were always sharing talks and strategies, and he saw my approach and he started to call me. What'd you call it, David?
Pasha, Marbue Pasha. Every time. Every time. Seriously. It's a word.
What does that mean?
It means many different things depending on where you are, but it's a word of a leader, a general, someone that's an authoritative figure, but it also has a wisdom aspect to it. We were speaking earlier and I was talking about, being able to converse with you. We'll like, just like when we're playing, go at it in the paint for as long as we possibly can. And then, the winner, there is no winner, there is no loser at that point. It's the journey. And that's why I love speaking with you. Like, you're an intellectual person that, that's helped me, on my 41-year journey substantially. So, very honored to be your first guest on this podcast. I mean, this is the privilege and honor is all mine. But yeah, Marbue Pasha is he's a great man. That's what Pasha means, great man. That's what he is.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
We're going to have to get one of those Zoom background signs with that phrase right up there.
I'll hang it up right behind you.
Wonderful.
And please, David, we want you to be a future guest host in so much that we do, and we want to share this journey, continue to share this journey with you in so many ways, right? Because you're one of the most multifaceted, multi-talented people, and you're very understated and unassuming, even though you're 7 feet tall. And I just look forward to continue to share with each other and grow with each other and influence others to share the same. So, blessings.
Thank you very much.
Well, David, with all that introduction, now it's going to become a mission in my life to actually meet you face to face, because when I stand next to Marbue, I look like a hobbit. I can imagine when I stand next to you.
I felt like a hobbit.
we don't judge. We include everyone. Height doesn't matter.
Well, no, and you know what, and that's a great way of just starting a discussion, about the inclusivity, which tends to get a bad word with certain communities, especially here in the U.S., where there's almost a pushback to a lot of this stuff, saying, people are just woke and blah 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 blah, which is now starting to affect bottom line business. And so, when we start to take into account, where we all started, myself in New York City, Marbue in Houston, but really starting in Liberia, with his growth, and your start, in the Nashville area, we all have stories about, what we witnessed, in myself in the 60s and 70s and your guys in the 80s and 90s. There seems to be, just a current state of change. right? Especially in the 60s. I mean, I remember watching on TV with horror things like the Vietnam War and protesters and stuff like that. And that was with limited amount of media. Now, with what's out there, where we're just blasted at all times between social media, mainstream media, and just all this stuff. And then even within our families, our communities, and everyone's having these opinions, and it's based on feelings when we should really be looking elsewhere, take into account the feeling piece of that. But where are the the measures of ethics, morals, and how do we bring that from our day-to-day lives and start to really believe in it, and show leadership in business? And have you ever seen any examples of your youth and how you've been able to, take the learnings of what you've seen, and then strategize around that to be the successful businessman that you are?
Well, I'm becoming, it's always a process, so I had a very unique background. My father played professional sports, so I traveled around a lot. But when we settled in Nashville, it was the first time in my life where I was in an area for more than 6 months, and I truly didn't have any friends. The first person that befriended me was a kid named Eric Sizemore. Eric, we're polar opposites. He country, grew up on a farm, Caucasian, speaks. There's no reason why we should be friends. Eric and I became best friends. What I learned going from the multifaceted worlds of Philadelphia and Los Angeles and San Francisco, and going to the simplicity in Nashville, was that there's a human connection that everyone's seeking, and the disconnection between people, when it's tied to race, creed, and color, that's where you have those cracks in ethics, because you're kind of more on your line, talking just about emotions and not facts. The fact is, we are all the same people. That's the fact. And once we get there, we'll be able to build a foundation to actually build a more equitable system. Because until you have a universal understanding, you can't ever come to that consensus to even start the build. As a construction person, if you're fighting over the windows, the lighting, all that, you're never going to start the build. So it's creating, kind of like in a business, a corporate culture, but almost like a world culture, understanding that we're no longer fragmented as a U.S., Mexico, Canada, Europe, Africa, Middle East, China. We're a planet, and that's an evolution of the mind, more than anything. And I think we're seeing that. We're seeing less pollution of stereotypes that divide people that are considered social norms, and I think that's where you're getting this pushback. Terms like peanut gallery, that has historical connotations. That's negative. But people use that in everyday vernacular, not understanding the history. So I'm huge on I was a history and philosophy major at Colorado. I'm huge on history, because until you know where you were, you'll never be able to know where you're going.
Yes, powerful.
When it comes to sorry, brother, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, to really touch on that point, when we looked at something like Redskins for the Washington team, a lot of us grow up with all the memorabilia hanging around our rooms. In our subconscious, we know there's something wrong with this term, but in popular culture, it's acceptable. So you just go along with it until people start to push back hard enough. And again, over generations is where you start to see policies change, because there's a resistance to the old. So we all get the benefits of growing now in a world where it's called Commanders. Why didn't that happen sooner, right? And so I think we're in a transition. And when you're in a transition, you don't know what's on the other side of that progress. And so you're going to have people resistant because they have a foundational understanding of reality around them. When you show up in someone's life, you can be bringing them great blessings, but they're going to push back on those blessings because they're not going to recognize it as blessings. And that's all part of the growth process. So it's interesting to see it on the day-to-day level, and then how it ebbs and flows on the macro level in the day-to-day living.
So you mentioned about the Washington Redskins, and I have a little side story here, David. You are now introduced to the living, functional, real human being of Forrest Gump. I've lived a life where I've just met people. I don't know how it happens, but we just run with it, and I got great stories. And one of them happens to do with the Redskins, where I was introduced through mutual friends to a lady who was in architectural school, but then dropped out to help her brother form an advertising company in Bethesda, Maryland. And they grew up in a in a nice neighborhood, but middle class, right? Their dad was a photographer for National Geographic, but her brother was really shrewd, and she was really good with numbers. So out of their kitchen table, they grew up a penny saver advertising company, which then grew into being the advertising firm for the New York Daily News, which then turned into U.S. News and World Report, which then all of a sudden became the .com advertising company back in the late 90s. And they got approached by a European advertising company and purchased them for over $4 billion. And this was a sister-brother team, right? So with the money that she had, she bought, and this is the rumor about how this happened, but it would seem like Michelle would do that. So my friend Michelle Snyder bought for her little brother Dan Snyder the Washington Redskins, and actually and the stadium, right, and renamed it FedEx Field because they were actually bidding with the founder of FedEx. So Fred was there, Fred Smith, but he was such a gracious man from Memphis. That all of a sudden they gave him the naming rights because he was such a gentleman in all the negotiations. Fast forward to what's happened over the past like 6 years or so, where there was a lot of folks, including a lot of politicians that were kind of like, well, we want to push, but we don't want to push too hard. Why? Because they wanted to be inside the owner's booth during Redskins games. Right. So that's a reason not to push. But finally, the public opinion was just so strong that when they named themselves the Washington football team, I wish they would have kept the name. It's much better than the Commanders, because you know what the nickname is? It's the Washington Commies. So, so is that progress or not? Right. So with the new leadership and the new owner, it'll be interesting to see how they do. I really don't care how they do because I'm a New York Giant fan. So I want to make sure that they're always in turmoil.
I'm so sorry for you.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that Eli comes back out of retirement, but that's another story.
You need everyone. You need Strahan. You need Amani Toomer. You need everyone to come back.
David, your father played for what NFL team?
Philadelphia Eagles, San Francisco 49ers, Los Angeles Rams, and then the Atlanta Falcons.
Wow.
What was the favorite stop, do you think, for
Philly.
the family, for yourself? Philly.
My mom's from South Jersey originally. So,
so there you go.
Yeah, so I mean, it was Philly. I mean, that's every time one say, like, when they ask me where, like, my team where we lived, it's Nashville and Philly. Like, we lived in LA, we lived in San Francisco, we lived in Atlanta, but that was just an in-between time of Nashville.
What about Indiana? You also, that's like your second or third home as well, right?
Yeah, Indiana now. Colorado, I would say that'd be my second home.
Okay.
Indiana now, after I got drafted here in 2004, been 20 years almost,
Wow.
Wow.
Spent half my life in the state of Indiana. So, but I like Indiana. It's like I said, the people, they're very similar to people from Tennessee. Very similar interests, very similar ones. But at the same time, like I said, now that I'm old, I get to speak to kids, and I always tell them, basketball is a journey, not a destination.
Mm.
And your goal is to, along that journey, have fun. And the second you stop having fun, start looking for a real job, because that's what it is. You can be amazing at this sport, and if you stop having fun, they'll keep you around. But you're not going to reach your full potential. And then eventually, you're going to have to find what you really wanted to do. And I got lucky enough to kind of not care that they didn't want me around anymore, and I just always focused on what I wanted to do. It's a good and bad trait. It's kind of like one of those tragic flaws, like Oedipus. Your strength is your weakness.
Mm. Boy, that's a phrase to live by right there, right? Especially when both of you gentlemen were professional athletes. Marbue, you over in Europe, of course, the NBA, David, and of course your little soiree into China, which we will get to. But,
He played Jungle Ma.
对对 harder 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 yeah
So a Chinese phone call, he goes, Wei, ni hao, harder, bye bye. That's all it is.
You are fluent.
Yes. If you ever get a phone call from China, just say that, and they'll know exactly what just happened.
And when you're in the restaurant, there's only two things you really have to know about. One is Fuyan,
yeah,
yeah, right, and Maidan,
check. Yep.
Yeah.
But if you're in Beijing, you have to get the they have like a slang.
They
so
do.
It's
That's right. Well, China, David. My goodness. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I spend most of my time between Wuhan and Shanghai. And Shanghai, what was great was doing a lot of real estate development there. I would meet with these state-owned enterprises, usually Chinese Communist Party backed, and they have a certain rhythm about how they speak to you. Because usually there's the big guy that sits right in the middle of the table, and he's got at least 10 other people on either side all the time. And they all greet you the same way. And it's always very gracious in the beginning. And then all of a sudden, like, they slap the table and they go da 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 da. And then the final piece is da 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 da. And really what they're saying is, welcome to China. We must work together. Yeah, follow my rules. This is the way it's going to go. And we will all be collaborative and everything will be great. But you have to listen to this entire speech. So I always had an interpreter next to me because I could hear Chinese fairly well, especially Mandarin. But speaking it was always a little difficult. But this girl was from Wuhan. And we're sitting there in Shanghai, and they all start speaking Shanghaiese, which is
Chinese. Yeah.
And like saying thank you is xie, right? In Shanghai is xiano. Like totally different languages, right? So they start talking back and forth, and I lean over to my interpreter and said, "What are they saying?" And she goes, "I don't know." Like, wow. So China, for those from the outside in, they think it's all the same, just one big Chinese. But as you know, there's thousands of minorities, different ways of speaking and working. Like in Guangdong, where you played ball, is much different than in the north with Beijing.
Right? Yeah, I mean that's because of the Canton culture. The Cantonese and Guangdong will have people speaking both, but mainly Mandarin. But Guangdong's really close to Hong Kong. And in Hong Kong, Guangdong, I love Cantonese. Cantonese. The thing is, when it translates, it's a hood language. It truly is. It is a hood language. Like all my guys in Hong Kong, I'm like, and if you even think about Chinese, ni hao means you good. That's what it means. You good? Go to China. Their favorite food is watermelon and fried chicken. I've always said there's so many cultural things that no one knows. And it really would. But yeah, I love the dialects there. Like in Beijing, 吃了吗? That means hello, and that comes from the Great Famine. And 吃了吗 means have you eaten? And your answer is 没吃了, I've eaten. So if you've eaten, good day. So that's the cultural aspect of the language and things like that. Wow. You have to immerse yourself a bit to be able to get that level of interpretation, because like on the outside it looks like a giant homogenous thing,
That's
but
right.
internally, well, I don't think we should say this. I don't know. but internally there are differences, and I would say this: the Chinese state does respect the differences.
Yes, they do.
They do respect the differences of people. They will not respect the differences of people that lead to social unrest, but they do respect the differences of people. And I mean, that's the thing, you know, as a Western individual, mindset type thoughts and patterns. When you look at another government, it's easy to turn your nose up and say, "Oh, that's wrong. Oh, that's this. Oh, that's whatever." I always say there are people treat them. When I was in China, this is your show. I'm here to play basketball. Well, that's why I wasn't over there talking about political things. When I was in America, these are my people. This is my show. I'm gonna go on the stage and I'm gonna present what I want. They did not like that approach, but that's the thing. Yeah, it's. I am a big fan of social justice. You know, kind of going back to like what we were speaking about how things are changing, but there's also a level of social stupidness that gets associated with it when you are not allowed to have a debate, when you're immediately labeled an anti-Semite or a homophobe or anything else like that, because you have a level of a dissenting opinion on a topic. It doesn't, name pointing and things doesn't work both ways. If when one side does it, it's just as wrong. I mean, one of Marbue's biggest fights ever was my stance on Black Lives Matter and all life matters. I'm the person who's under this stance that all lives matter. And in my opinion, it is the hyper aggression of the police force that we should be focusing on. Yes, it targets and disparages the Black community, but it also, what area I was growing up in Nashville, cops would beat the crap out of those white boys just as much. So it's all lives to me. I understand the movement. I'm behind the message. But the thing is, it's the focus in the end goal. Because if you incorporate this to include how this could negatively affect all Americans, you can get a result. When you have to show the fact that it is disproportionately affecting this group of Americans, that's not bad, but it's not going to get the change I think that it's seeking. Like I said, that was my stance.
Right. I could say a lot to that, but yeah, I mean that's the whole point here about being American, is having dissenting opinions and finding a middle ground, finding compromise, bringing some nuance, understanding to dialogue, and we don't have that. You know, so if you say all lives matter, then that means that you don't give a damn about Black people, you know, and or you don't want to put the light on what you want or on what needs to be put on. You want to just blanket a whole thing across people who are already in a position that we're not in. So that's how people feel when they hear certain things, and their feelings end up leading everything and not their thoughtfulness around the whole conversation. So it's great to have these dialogues and to get on these points. And there's so much to cover. Like, we could talk for 4 hours on this podcast and just be getting started, because we could talk about China for an hour. You know, we could talk about sports for another hour. We could talk about business for, you know, we could talk about so much. So it's going to be a rich dialogues that we have frequently, I think. And it's exciting.
One of the things, David, that you rightfully pointed out is that I had a whole different perspective after living in Shanghai all those years of being immersed in that environment. I had my son who was born in Shanghai, and my parents came to go see him about a month after he was born. And my mom and dad had never been to China before. And my dad had this perception that, you know, a communist type of way of working, that there would be a soldier on every corner with a gun, right? And he was shocked. He goes, "This reminds me of Manhattan." I said, yeah, same type of energy, just a few more Chinese people.
A few
So,
more. Yeah.
so you know, when I was being questioned by a lot of my friends that I grew up with in New York, which is a little bit more you know, worldly thinking, you would think, they were all shocked, saying, you know, well, you know, what about Taiwan? What about all these things? I said, you know what? When you have 1.4 to 1.6 billion people that you need to take care of every day, and have the astuteness to understand that it is not homogenous, it's not, you don't treat the same people in the South as you do up in the North. There's nuances about how you govern. I said they have their hands full right now, and sometimes they may come across heavy-handed, but try to make sure that 1.4 to 1.6 billion people during that time period are not going to either revolt or not care. So there's this nuance of underlying pressures, including hosting worldwide events at the time when I was living there, like the Beijing Olympics
Beijing Olympics, yeah.
with the summer, and then 2 years later the World Expo in Shanghai. There was a lot of anticipation and inspiration that they were going to really open up, but that doesn't help them, and a sick China does not help the world, right? An unstable type of China does not help the world. So, you know, I come across a little differently sometimes, and it's not a sympathizer. I mean, there's a lot of stuff wrong there, but man, there's a lot of stuff wrong in Washington D.C. too, right? So
That's why I always say it's like with the Brittany Grinder thing. Everyone is up in arms against Russia for being an authoritarian government. And I just literally said, Russia has a right to enforce their laws the way in which they choose fit. Brittany Grinder is in violation of that Russian law. Brittany Grinder is subject to Russian law. Why don't we look at our own government and make the same statements? Because there are people in jail for the same thing here. So let's focus on what we can fix and focus our energy. One of my favorite artists is Bob Dylan. And there's a song called The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll. You know, in the chorus, he goes, for you who philosophize disgrace and criticize all fear, take the rag away from your face because now's not the time for your tears. So that's like the first couple of choruses. And at the end, he talks about how the guy who killed Hattie Carroll just because he was drunk and could gets a 6-month sentence. And then he enters the chorus again, and he's like, for you who philosophize disgrace and criticize all fear, bury the rag most deep in your face, because now is the time for your tears. It's understanding the injustice and then acting. You know, Hattie, like one of these Hattie Carroll's a maid of the kitchen. You know, she had 12 kids and all this other stuff. Don't cry about that. You know, that's sad. Don't cry about that. You know, he just goes through it all, and then at the end, like this is where the energy's focused. Because if you focus it here, there'll be change. Like I said, my Bob Dylan is, when you listen to his collections, he's almost like a prophet. He's talking about things in the 60s that are coming true now. I mean, it's only a pawn in their game is the greatest way to describe the social economics that are associated with racism. You know, I mean, there's just so much that it's hard to see unless you know. And that's why education is key for absolutely everyone. Absolutely everyone. I wish
too, David. Sorry to interject.
Oh, go.
Your deep intellect to extract such wisdom from Dylan's words from generations ago and bring them to the forefront for today. For the average listener, for a conversation like this, you know, we can reach people in their 70s. We can reach people in their 20s. Brother Paul, for the average listener, it'd be interesting for you to learn his experience in music in the 80s when he had hair up here and he was touring around. Brother Paul, can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, another Forrest Gump moment, David. Um, uh, I happened to be standing in line at the registrar's line at New York Institute of Technology in Manhattan because I was going to architectural school. And there was a guy ahead of me that was a music major. And today you do the registers up online or on your mobile phone, right? But you used to have to stand there and fill out forms and hope that the classes didn't fill up, right? Well, this guy and be there for hours. And this guy ahead of me had some sheet music, and he was writing on the stanzas, and it was wrong, and it was driving me crazy because I'm a classically trained pianist. So I tapped him on the shoulder. And I said, "No, man, you got to do it this way. It's 3/4 time. It's not 4/4 time." And blah 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 blah. We started talking. He goes, "So you play keyboards, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I'm a sound engineer at SIR Studios over on the West Side, and I know a band that needs a keyboard player for this weekend. And this was on a Friday." He goes, "They just need someone to practice with because they're about to break it. They're about to be signed to Warner Brothers. Maybe you should just fill in." So I did, and I quit school on Monday. And yeah, my mom and dad weren't too pleased about that, but we went on being signed to Neat Records, which was distributed through Warner.
Mhm.
We made it very, very big in Europe because we were an American band, but we were seen as the American version of Squeeze, if you remember that band from the '80s. And we hit it pretty big. I almost feel like I should have been in that movie, Almost Famous, because we almost made it. We were up for best band of the year, best male vocalist, best song of the year at the New York Music Awards, and we lost two: Billy Joel, Taylor Dane. They Might Be Giants, and I sat next to Debbie Gibson. That was a big deal. So that was my little brush with fame. But when you're signed to a major label, you are signed to an individual contract so that they can pay you scale wages
Mhm.
out on the road. But that also means that they have control over you. So there were certain times where we would be, playing, and we'd be like, let's say, at the China Club, and there would be other artists that would come up, such as David Bowie's band, such as people from Frank Zappa's band, Julian Lennon, things like that. So being in New York at that time in the '80s was great. But my biggest claim to fame, it's the only reason why I can kind of talk to you guys, especially as pro athletes, is that I was on the 30 on 30 on ESPN last year because I took a photograph of the China Club marquee and our name was on there because we were the house band, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, it was used to show how the New York Mets in 1986 were such just partiers that was one of their main hangouts. So that's my big claim to fame with pro sports. So,
Well,
and one thing I wanted to bring up, David, and Marbue, I definitely want your opinion on this as well. So, I'm actually an ice hockey player. That's what I did my entire career. I was pretty good at it, and for me to say pretty good, I'm really humble when it comes to a lot of the things that we do. So that means that, yeah, like national teams, that type of thing, we did fairly well. But every time we went upstate New York, like New York State Championships in high school hockey, we get our butts kicked because everything north of Poughkeepsie is Canada. So
yeah.
and these kids play really, really well. But one thing that I learned from that time of the intensity of sport, especially a team sport like basketball, like a hockey team, there is this trust factor that comes in and an energy that sometimes isn't spoken but felt. And when you were playing, could you describe, that feeling? Because pro sports, as you're coming up, like through Colorado and through high school, there is that emotional attachment, right? That wonderful energy that now that we're mature enough in business, we try and recapture that with people that we meet to be that team so that we can actually move forward and get to our results. Um, do you remember any time where you're just like, man, if it wasn't for the team, this wouldn't have happened there, or the way that you guys stuck together during a certain, challenge?
Well, one of the most documented, I'd say, moments in my professional career was the Malice in the Palace.
Huh.
It was when there was a fight between Ron Artest and Ben Wallace on the court, and then some fan threw a beer at Ron. Ron left the fan, and then Bedlam. Um, the sticking together moment was the next day. Everyone gets their suspensions, and there are 6 healthy players to play. and we're playing against the Orlando Magic. And Orlando Magic, with the number 1 pick that year, picked Dwight Howard, and he was a center, and I'm a center. And so I'm sitting there just like, this is my moment. And during that game, I played for 38 minutes. I had like 19 points, 8 rebounds. Great game. Had a great game. And after that, we lost, and but we took them to overtime. The crowd gave us a standing ovation. And after that game, we're sitting around with me, James Jones, Fred Jones, Jeff Foster, and we're just icing because we have a game in another. Like, we had practice the next day. We had a game the night before, and everyone's just dead. And we looked at each other and we said, "We're going to beat the out of this next team." And we went out there for the next 8 games, and we went 5-3 with 6 players in the NBA.
Wow.
You know, we banded together, and those 3 games we lost were all close. And we were the subs, we were the backups playing against the starters. That was my band of brother moment, I would say, in the NBA. You get those a lot more in the lower divisions, you know, in college and in high school, but the one big moment was that after the Malice and the Palace, that team of 6 guys going out there and, you know, soldiering on.
Wow. Wow. You know, when you're now, you know, rising into the elite of business leaders, and, you know, when you find a meaningful project that has impact, things that you know that you can not only just make money with, because making money is the easy part, but it's the reverberation of that, right? And when I say making money is easy, what I mean by that is that we can all get jobs tomorrow and make money, right? But pushing sometimes the boulder up the hill because of a cause, because of an impact, that's harder to actually extract, you know, continuous money from. It can be, you know, wrought with challenges, not just resource-wise, money and time, but also with direction. Have you seen, or have you felt in your business career something that could be equivalent to that moment of those, you know, of that 8-game stretch of playing against the NBA, totally under strength, but you persevered?
It just happened in my company. You know, the chairman of my board and I got into a bit of a dispute. And we took it to a board vote. He didn't like the outcome. And so I ended up dismissing him from my company. Before then, we're scraping in capital. Nothing's really going right. Now everyone's worried because we lost, you know, this reputed congressman and all this other stuff. And then the next week we closed the round to close our seed. So, I mean, we banded together. It was us versus them. You know, it was the first time where members of my company took massive ownership over what we're doing. And, you know, what we're doing is, as you talk about, like, how making money is easy. In my opinion, when money can be a byproduct of a passion, that's when you're in the right spot, you know? And for me, in this case, you know, cannabis has been, as we spoke about social justice, everything. If we were to just dissect it and go down the rabbit hole of what happened to turn this substance into a Schedule 1, a lot of people would be embarrassed. A lot of people. And that's not the point of it. You know, this is a medicine that helps people live their lives better. And it being restricted from them forces them to do things that makes their lives worse. It's been something that I've believed in my entire life. I like, since I was this is the sad thing. There's a statement that the guy made to me. It's like, if you can think the same thing when you're 40 that you did when you're 20, you're a fool. And I said, well, since the fact that I felt the same way when I was 20, weed should be legal, and I stood up for it and got crucified, and now everyone thinks the same way I am, what does that make you? And he did not like that statement. But at the same time, it's one of the things I've learned is, if you're wanting to be a visionary, prepare to become a martyr. And in business, it's very similar. If you want to be a disruptor, prepare to be a martyr. My business isn't disrupting anything; it's fixing something, and it's a holistic solution to the problem of cannabis banking. It's a system for us by us, and I say us because I'm in this industry. I've opened grows. I've put these plants in the ground with my hands. This is something that I have a passion for, and I've dedicated my life, for good or for bad, for it. I see the good, and I always argue it. And there's bad, but the bad's associated with the criminalization.
Yes.
To take away the criminalization, your bad argument goes all the way away. So, I mean, when I arguing with facts. We were talking about emotions, and that's the thing. You're talking like it's the propaganda that it's not even propaganda. It was the force of will of the government to literally lock people in cages for plants. And then when you read the memos of Nixon talking about the people that he wanted locked in cages and how to lock them in them, using this as a mechanism. We were speaking earlier, it's when the government puts trap doors and booby traps life almost to get you, and that's the scary aspect of things, and those are the things that any actual conversation of a rescheduling or anything of cannabis has to incorporate. You can't just say, "Oh, it's legal now." You can't. You can't. And if they do, the chaos that would follow. I'm here on MJ BizCon, and everyone's talking about federal legalization. And I stood up and I said, "How many of you people raise your hand if you have a vertically integrated grow in a state?" Everyone in the room raised their hand, pretty much. Raise your hand if you have multiple. Everyone raise your hand. Raise your hand if you have a grow that's located in Humboldt County, California. No one in there raised their hand. Where is the best marijuana in the world grown? Humboldt County, California. Where do you think people are going to get all of the marijuana that they want once it's federal legal and can go across state lines? Humboldt County, California.
Right.
So I'm keep on sitting around preaching for your federal legalization and keep on bemoaning the fact that we have this opportunity to actually build this industry, and you'll get what you want. You know what I mean? Like, you'll get what you want. And then when the reckoning happens, remember I warned you. But I mean, it's the truth. I mean, it's like champagne. I think like Corbel can call them champagne, but unless it's grown with a certain grape, a certain region in France, champagne. Cannabis will go through a similar thing once it's federally done. I mean, like I said, it's going to be, people don't know what they want. They don't know what they ask for. Freedom is what they think, but freedom is the ability to fail as well. And people don't like that, that's the thing in cannabis. It's like, hey, let's throw some seeds in the ground, make $1 million. It's like, no, dude, that's not how it works. Like, it's not how it works. It's a very integrated industry, a lot of innovation, a lot of technology, a lot of science. Entrepreneurial wise, I mean, entrepreneurial wise, doing a cannabis grow was harder than creating a Web3 fintech to have a geofence transaction. It was like literally, it was harder. It was harder to run a cannabis grow day to day in all the aspects of it than building my technology. Like that, I can make that statement.
Wow. David, for the listeners out there, if they want to know more information specifically about what your company's doing, and then for this growth of the industry, are there places that you can point them to?
Definitely my website for my company. But like for cannabis, the event I'm at now with MJ BizCon is really good. They have like economic forums. They have a lot of political talk. But it's more honestly like the stuff you see mainstream is almost propaganda. It's to promote an industry of youth and all this other stuff. Cannabis, it's not new. It's just now legal. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's always been. It's called the traditional market, the black market. It always has and always will be. That's literally the vein, the heart of this market. As that market flows, the white market flows. If there's high prices in the black market, I guarantee you can be high prices in the white market. You know, that's the hidden hand, as Adam Smith would say. Like that's kind of like what you won't be able to see in like the mainstream outlets of what you're getting. But like I said, MJ Biz is a good. Bazinga does a lot of on cannabis as well. But it's just there's no central like my one of the articles about my companies in High Times. You know, the image of High Times is Cheech and Chong with the people running around stoners, but it's not. It's a business magazine that focuses on the cannabis industry.
Right.
You know, it's but like I said, it's more propaganda. But they have that iconic place as High Times. You know, getting my company in High Times in the mirror, like walking around at MJ BizCon, people like, dude, you guys were in High Times. I was like, yeah. I go to Wall Street, it's like they're in High Times. You know what I mean? Like,
So for the Spicoli crowd in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, you're a god.
oh yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so-
Yeah,
but,
Holy man, that light was red.
you know, the way that perception does change over time, both politically, socially, right, and then morals and ethics. I mean, what a prime example that you're just talking about now. You know, I'm not a smoker, but I do see CBD products now also having real measurable medicinal help for people. So you are right. This isn't about trying to disrupt something. It's trying to fix perception. And boy, that's a big boulder to push up the hill, because there are so many fronts that you're going to have to touch upon. And I just wish you all the success in the world there, David.
I want to use this opportunity really quickly because the person who introduced Paul and I is a gentleman by the name of David Uslan. And David Uslan and his family helped create the Batman franchise. And earlier this year, when we were spending time in LA, this pen was gifted to me by David for one of the companies that he has called Plug and Play. And you can easily plug these cartridges in to these vape pens and get some medicinal use, help quell the nerves. So the fact that our namesake is elevated business, it has double entendres, triple entendres. We stay elevated and medicated. And it brings it full circle because David is also going to be a future guest on the podcast, and he's one of our partners. And
Hey,
we're very thankful that he introduced us and brought us together. You know, marijuana was a thing where it really made me want to not play in the NBA. You know, because I was an avid user starting in college, coming from Houston, Texas. It was frowned upon, and you didn't want to play with that because if cops pull you over, they'll incarcerate you for lesser things. So, you know, I first tried marijuana in high school with so much fear and trepidation. But when I went out to California, it was commonplace. You know, I'm meeting surfers who go surf at 6 a.m. and then they're smoking a bowl. I'm like, what's a bowl? And they have these huge, like 3, 4, 6 foot looking bongs. And they're just inhaling all of it. I'm just like, what is this? You can't live long doing this. What's going on? But it became commonplace. And I realized, like, these are some of the smartest, most successful students, you know, and the range of topics and all of that. And then I started trying it in my sophomore year, in my late sophomore year, and my grades started to go up. My highest GPA was when I was taking 23 credits when most kids take 12. And I'm taking all these classes, and I got an A in my calculus class. And I was just starting to regularly use marijuana. I became the most dominant player in my conference, leading in points, rebounds, and blocks per game in the Big West using marijuana. And so it became a huge value add for me because I got into less fights. My temper went down. I could actually concentrate when I smoked the right strains. And so when it came time now, and you have Pat Riley at my games, and when me and David are playing, we got NBA scouts looking at these guys, and I don't want to go to the NBA where I'm going to be vilified, and there's going to be narratives spoken about me if I don't adhere to the norms, and I want to do my own thing. I want to rap and I want to smoke, and I'm going to be labeled a thug and all these things. So I'm just going to stay away from that institution and go my own route independently. And so when I watched even David being persecuted and, marijuana being one of the reasons why in the NBA, I was like, oh, okay, I was wise for staying away from that, because what it does is when they start writing articles about you to sublime you in different ways as to why you're not getting playing time because it's marijuana or whatever, now companies don't want to hire you. Now you're stigmatized going forward. So I had a fear of going into these places where they want to drive and control the narrative about you and what you're doing. Today, it's a whole different world, and so it's interesting to see how quickly reality can change for the good, right? And that means we're in a precipice in a time where a lot of things can change. But again, there's that resistance on the other side to keep things as they are, because people have been programmed and conditioned to believe that this is the healthier way. And now you have a new, better solution and evidence and facts, but their feelings is what matters more than those things. So these dialogues and these discussions go such a long way to open up people's mind states, I believe.
I think that's like when you're talking about people's mind states, Marbue, it's almost the natural state of humanity is fear, and it's primarily the fear of the unknown. And by definition, the unknown is the future. So they rely on the past to try to predict the future. 1984, he who controls the past, he who controls the present controls the past, he who controls the past controls the future. That's how people kind of get their function. In the now, if there is a change that is different, that is obstructing their past, their ideals, their morals, or whatever of the past, the future is already unknown. It's scary. I don't want to have to reprogram myself and have to live in the future. It's in college, I read Aristotle's Republic, in Plato's Republic, and he talks about the cave.
Allegory of the cave.
Yeah. So in the cave, you have the guy who frees himself, goes outside, sees the world, comes back in and gets enslaved. Everyone that read that in that class said, oh, it's the philosopher king's duty to return to the cave. And I'm like, nope, not anymore. In this era of technology, with the ability to have the world's information in the palm of your hand, let's blow that cave door up. And let's move forward, because of those things are what's holding us back from change. There is no person that can claim ignorance very well to me anymore at a certain age. It can't happen. That is where that's where we can try to recondition, I guess, the message to where you're not blowing up the moralities of the past, you're honoring it and respecting them, because if that didn't happen, we wouldn't be here. So we must, but we have to also understand the dinosaurs aren't here anymore. And it wasn't just the asteroid that did it. Things change, so must we. Like we were talking about earlier, I said, we're all the same people. We have to come to that. And how do we come to that? Is with science. And we define evolution as allele changes over generations. Everything evolves over time. Everything. Nothing's stagnant. Stagnation is death. So if you want to be happy-go-lucky, make America great again, 1950, you want to be dead. You don't want to be alive. You don't want to be now, because now is different. And what's coming next is going to be what you fear, which is change. But I mean, it's fear. Fear and greed are the two things those are the two things that make us primal, in my opinion, when it comes to flight or flight response. Everyone's wired fight or flight. You know, you get the flight response, then you add it with hyper fear greed, you're actually running. You know, you get a fight response, and you're actually fighting. If you're able to sit there and see it what it is, see it for what it is, and then associate it to one, it really doesn't matter, because in the long run, it's not going to break you unless you let it.
Mhm.
And that's the main thing I learned with the NBA. All they wanted me to do, like you said, is comply. Sit there, speak the King's English, be the good second generation player who says hi and respectful, says ma'am, whatever. That's me. I say yes, ma'am. I say yes, sir. I grew up in the South. I have manners. But that doesn't make me a person that's going to sit around and spit propaganda that marijuana is a substance that is bad. Especially when you're not even testing for HGH, but we won't even talk about that. But like, it's I didn't want to play that game. You know, yesterday I got to meet Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s
I was
son.
going to ask you about that. I was just going to
Yeah,
ask you.
you know, I'm talking to him, and I'm sitting there in reverence to the fact that this man literally existed in another man's testicle. That's literally like when you boil it down. Like, but that man, yeah, that man was amazing. And the ramifications of that man's life has shadowed through his, because in his voice and in his message, I had emotional responses to. You know, like it was something that was powerful and moving and driving. It was just him literally just talking about how great of a world we're in and how we should be thankful for where we came from.
Mm.
You know, I mean, it's the more we reject what happened and lie about it, the worse it's going to be coming to terms with.
Yes.
And that's the thing. It just gets worse. It's like digging a deeper and deeper hole. And then eventually you're like, let's start trying to dig up. You can't dig up.
No. You got people wanting to go to war to fight for what they believed because you're upending it. And it's a lot of lies embedded, and the truths are starting to come to light, and now they're going to fight for the lies. So were you meeting with MLK the Third at the conference? Was he at that conference interested in those topics?
Yeah, the conference here is a lot about women ownership and, you know, social equity, very, very heavily themed. I think he sees cannabis as a forefront that is an avenue of, even if you are Caucasian in the cannabis industry, you have very sympathetic leanings towards African American communities. You know, it's a very African American driven culture industry. And I think he kind of sees it as being able to, I mean, I think he sees it as being able to deliver a message of peace and unity to a group of people that are willing to listen. And hopefully it will resonate, you know, through them, through others, and pass into society. You know, that's what I think.
Powerful. So, did you network with him? Are you looking at doing anything with him in the future, or is he just going to be a friend?
Just said hi. You know what I mean? Talked, took a picture, had about 5 minutes with him after the event. The guy who hosted it was getting angry because I was kind of taking over. I'm 7 feet tall, play basketball. Everyone wants stories, you know?
Yep.
And like looking at his watch, and I'm sorry, but this is my turn. But I mean, but like I said, it was very, very, very good conference here so far. Meeting a lot of people. Very, like, everyone has the same horrific stories about their banking experiences, being kicked out, not being able to get it, paying high fees, not being able to get you know, vendor payments out, not being able to get processing for payments. It's just all across the board. But it's a story that I lived. I tell them, I was like, I know exactly what you're talking about. I lived it. You know, let's work together and we can solve it. And that's what it's about. It's about collaboration.
So we're on the Elevated Business Podcast, having the pilot show. You just met MLK the Third, a historic figure in our country for so many reasons. He's in our network with Ray Ramsey, who you know well. And he's going to be a future guest on the podcast. I think just with this discussion, the everyday person, when we talk about all of these highbrow topics that can get complex and complicated, and we simplify these discussions, one of the things that I think is almost imperative to share are some of the struggles that we have to get to these heights and to build our wisdom. And, for myself, for example, at 23, after 1 year of playing professionally, I had such a vision and a passion to want to create impact in the world now that I quit basketball and took what a little money that I had and started an entertainment company to make movies and music and touch on topics like the ones we're talking about here. And that was a painful experience to end up living out of my car, failing to do that because I didn't know how to manage money, and I was too trusting of people and too selfless. And I had to create boundaries and learn and fall and grow to walk. In your journey, David, there was an article years back that at some point you even had to work at McDonald's after the heights of professional basketball, just like I had to live out of my car. What did that type of experience do along your journey, having to humble yourself to go work at a McDonald's, and how did it help you now have such command that you have in your professional career?
The thing is, it's funny when people ask me about that. It wasn't a humbling experience at McDonald's. It was a life experience. One of the things you know about me is, I have on a collared shirt and everything now for your podcast, but
I'm wearing your outfit. I'm wearing your outfit. You're wearing mine.
Exactly. I'll wear the same thing for 12 years. I don't care. I don't care about cars. Material things are very, very little to me. What that moment was for me was the realization of my responsibilities for myself. I had a son, and money was flying out. Money is flying out. Nothing's coming in. Nothing's coming in. Bills are getting slower. Cable bills getting paid next month. Like I'm just sitting around and I'm looking, and he comes to me and he wants to go to McDonald's, and so I'm like, yeah, let's go, bud. $10, Happy Meal, whatever. I didn't have the $10. I didn't have 10. I did not. I had it in some form that wasn't liquid. You know what I mean? But I couldn't spend it on it. And I look back at my life, all the waste, all the booze, drugs, all the waste, all the stupid stuff. And I sat there and I'm sitting there just like in this moment, standing there with the line behind me, my 4-year-old son crying because he can't get his Happy Meal. And that's when I did the most adult thing ever in my life. And it helped me get to where I am. I stopped blaming other people and I took responsibility. And that's when I did the McDonald's job. That was, I said, I need money coming in. And the guy, I knew the dude, he ended up giving my son his Happy Meal because I used to go through this drive-through like late at night and like tip him much money and stuff. But he offered me a managing position at the store off of 96 in Michigan in Indy. It was from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., 4 nights a week. And it was a little training week, so I started doing it. And that's when I learned my second lesson. I don't fit in the regular world, figuratively or literally. I couldn't turn without knocking something over. I'm ducking. I tried to do the drive-through window. I either got my back, I have to like lean down and like get in the window, or they're speaking to my crotch. It was like I do not fit. And that's the thing. That's when I realized if I'm to exist, I must find my place. And that's the path I was on. That's what led me, to all those different little ventures, to Morgan, and everything learned. I cannabis, banking, digital assets, software, all of those things were things that I just did. And this is why I believe in the centralized power in the universe. I wouldn't have ever been in this moment unless I did the things I did.
Yes.
I'm only perfect in my imperfection. So I
Yeah.
must thank the journey.
Yeah.
I must thank the journey.
Such wise words. Uh, and I wanted to make sure that we touched on these topics because they're relatable for more people than all the success and all the success and all the highbrow stuff. Because everybody has to go through these trials, and seeing a giant like yourself having to do the same things, it really humanizes the discussion. And I think that's one of the biggest drivers of this platform and this podcast is that we want the everyday person to come into our discussions and feel like they can sit down with us and have a conversation and share their journey and their wisdom, and we can all learn and benefit like one tribe, one community, one village, one people. No matter where we come from, our mother had to make our meals for us that we loved, whether we're an Eskimo, whether we live in the jungles of South America, whether we come from Ireland and have a fighting spirit. We can tell tales all across the world that unify the discussion and find the commonalities so that when we start to fracture or fragment, we can always come back to the commonalities and find common ground. When we talk about a place like Israel, what Israel should be is one of the most diverse places that all have a reverence for the divine. Whether you're a Hebrew Israelite or an Akhenazi Jew, you have the same plight, the same path, the same beliefs, and you find your commonalities even though you have some differences. So I think these type of discussions and this type of platform is going to help bridge some of the divides. And then when we can take the practical steps that we act upon in business and continue to scale these messages, that's where we really create impact and change. We have the COP28 conference coming up in Dubai, where luminaries from all over the world are going to be gathered for common ground around sustaining the planet and not using fossil fuels in the old archaic ways that our ancestors and forefathers thought was the way. Now we have the wisdom to consolidate power, to correct some of the mistakes of the past, finding these commonalities. So, in these discussions with a lot of people, there are a lot of self-serving, pretentious people who are at these places, and they can confuse people who are well-meaning and well-intentioned. It's our job to curate the right leaders to do the job and serve the task necessary so that the everyday people can see and emulate leadership. I think leadership is a key function in human history. It's the ones who take the power and let it sort of corrode and corrupt their greed. And then now, they're not serving the higher calling. So to find people that are humble and that are in servitude of the people with their wisdom, with their intellectual prowess is everything. And so you're a leader, David, and you always have been, not just in your physical stature, but in your intellect. And it's just been a blessing to see you grow and to see you come into your own. And now having this blockchain digital asset that you've been developing and bringing congressmen into it to help support you, so many young people of color can look at you and see that there's a way forward, whether you fall, whether people try to sublime you, whether people try to hold you back. You have the fortitude to really go forward. Sometimes it's dark. Sometimes you're by yourself. But, you're never really by yourself if you understand that there are others like us who care, others like us who are willing to share. So that's why I always give thanks and praise. We've fought in the paint, we fought in sports, but we've come together and bear hugged each other spiritually, energetically. And there's a way forward for people that have this kind of weighted consciousness. And I'm just so thankful and grateful for us to come together on this platform, man. It's powerful.
Thank you for especially having me on. You say being alone and in the journey, and one of the most benefits and why you have the nickname Pasha in my mind is I wasn't alone. I had great people like you to help lead me. You talked to me during times where you're like, David, we need to talk. You need to calm down. It's hearing it from another soldier in the front line. It's better. I can hear it better. But I was never alone. I had my family. I had my
Big
friend.
family, big
Yeah.
family. Too.
I
How
had my
many
friend,
siblings?
11, you know.
Wow.
You know, I had my family, my friends, and it helped me actually know who my friends are.
Hmm.
It helped me get closer to my family. Um, if something happens to you in life, good, bad, and different, just be happy that something has happened to you. Because if it didn't happen to you, you're probably dead. That's the thing. You have to celebrate life and all that comes with it.
The
Everything
yin
is,
and the yang.
yep, all that comes with it.
Well, thank you, Marbue. And David, uh, in business, sometimes there's certain words that can be triggers or can be taken the wrong way, especially when people want to push it into whatever narrative they have. But
Love.
we've never met before, but I can say that I've loved our time together, and I do mean that. You know, the energy that you do have is recognized. The way that you are so eloquent in your storytelling, and one word that Marby used, and humble about your storytelling. I really do hope that more listeners can take a look at this and not just learn from it, but be inspired by it. And Marble, yeah, it is about love, and we're never going to shy away from that word because it is the one unifying thing as human beings that we can have, no matter what we're going through. So, with that, David and my partner Marbu, thank you very much, and we look forward to having you on again soon. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, brothers.